Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Cloudy Sheep and we are playing a new run of Democracy 3, where we will be playing the United States and we will be turning them communist. So, that's going to be a very difficult task. Last time we turned the Soviet Union back to Imperial Russia in Hearts of Iron 4. Now we are playing Democracy 3 and we'll be talking a little bit about what Democracy 3 means as we set up this party over here. So here we can choose our party name, and I'm gonna name ourselves the Bernie Bros. Bros? Bros. And yeah, so our task over here will be as the Bernie Bros against the, I don't know, let's call them the Labour Party? No, that doesn't sound right. So our enemies will be the Liberal Front. We will be playing for 4-year term times, 2-term limits, so we will have very limited time to achieve our task. We will be playing with full difficulty. All of this is on, as far as it makes sense. Political apathy is pretty high. Innate socialism, I'm tempted a little bit to dial that down, but let's leave it at the standard. The difficulty is going to be immense anyway. So, I should be saying that Democracy 3 is a type of political game simulator, and we'll be getting to the main interface in a couple of seconds after this setup is complete down here. So, here we are. We are playing as a freshly elected president. The lives of all of the 300 million US citizens are now in our hands. There are a couple of difficult things, and you can read through this, but it is not that critical. What is critical is this screen over here. So this is a little bit difficult to read, but after a while it should be getting clearer. So the game, this is really the main interface, and it does take some time to get used to that fact. But so you can see there are a couple of these little circles over here, and they all represent different things. So you can see there's law and order, there's transport in this upper quadrant, there's policy, and so on and so forth. Now, the white things are policies, or are different kinds of things. For example, let's look at a simple one. Let's look at food stamps over here. So this is food stamps. As you can see, it's a policy, it's marked in white, and it does influence a couple of things. So you can see all of these outgoing arrows that do influence, for example, poverty, equality, poor earnings, health. These are the blue circles, and these are all statuses. So, for example, equality is a status, is a measure of how equal our society is. So you can see it's sort of middle of the ground, it's not particularly good, and you can see that it's caused by in turn a couple of things, including, for example, food stamps. So you can see all of the factors streaming into this. And the green things are generally things that increase equality, red things are in general things that decrease equality. So for example, you can see that food stamps does decrease it, there's a green arrow. It's a little bit overlaid by the real estate bubble, which in turn is a negative thing. You can see it has a negative effect on equality, it has also a negative effect on middle earnings and the youth, but it does have a positive effect on high earnings. In turn, it's driven by a couple of different things, and we'll talk about why it's red in a second. But yeah, that's the basic thing. You have policies, they influence various different statuses, such as equality, or let's have a look over here, alcohol consumption, and so on and so forth. So these are things that are influenced. There's the average temperature, CO2 emissions, so a couple of environmental things. There are a couple of educational things, like health, public services, like health, like the general environment, like private schools, and so on and so forth. So we'll be trying to keep an eye on that. There's also this bit in the middle over here, and this is pretty much a little bit difficult to read, but what it is it's showing our focus groups. So, for example, people who like capitalism, people who like socialism, people who are commuting, people who are farmers, people who are state employees, and so on and so forth. The sort of bar in behind, the grey one, is how many people of that creed there are. So you can see that there are a lot of conservatives, and there are not that many farmers, not that many young people, not that many poor. But yeah, quite a couple of socialists, quite a couple of capitalists, quite a couple of patriots, not that many state employees, quite a couple of conservatives, and so on. Then you have the lower bar, that is how happy these people are. You can see retired people are immensely happy, and that is mainly due to the state pensions. So let's have a look at state pensions. They're middle of the ground, and they do give a huge boost to the opinion of the retired. So the retired are very, very happy. Ethnic minorities, on the other hand, are not so happy, due to a couple of things: racial tensions, citizen tests, border controls, and most importantly ghettos. So you can see the negative effects over here. Actually, racial tensions is a little bit worse than ghettos. So these people don't really like us. They're not that many. They are increasing due to immigration. The income is okay, but yeah, they are a little bit not so happy with us. Likewise, the liberals, you can see all of these policies basically on the left-hand side. So all of the law and order things, all of the police, the Secret Service, all of that. Liberals really don't like any of these facts. So yeah, they're not particularly happy with us. And you can see that our overall popularity is consequently not that great at all. So we'll have to deal a little bit with that. Now, I talked about the white stuff, I talked about the blue stuff. Now, you can see there are a couple of red ones and green ones. As you can imagine, red ones are bad. So these are not necessarily things that are only a status, like poverty. Poverty, of course, is always bad, but there's a question of level, right? If you look at the real estate bubble, the thing is, this is nearly purely bad. So it drives down a lot of things: poor earnings, middle earnings, equality is going down, the youth really dislike that they are not able to get any housing at an acceptable level. So these are things that are sort of strictly bad, and they are driven by a couple of things. So by GDP, by immigration, and by the number of capitalists in the economy. So these are things that we should be looking at trying to fix, maybe, if we are wanting to get a little bit more popularity with the youth and so on. You can see that there are two lines over here, the stop trigger and the start trigger. So if we want to get rid of this, we have to push this level below the green line. So we have to do a couple of things that will decrease the real estate bubble, and if it goes below this percentage, then this situation will vanish and it's not going to be on this overall map anymore. Likewise with pollution over here, you can see if this would drop down a little bit, then we would be able to get rid of this effect. We'd be able to increase our tourism. Right now there's a negative effect on tourism. It would increase the opinion of environmentalists by a lot if pollution wasn't that high. But it would also decrease the membership of environmentalists. So right now, because the pollution is really bad, a lot of people are caring about this quite a bit, so environmentalist membership is up. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It really depends on how well environments like us. So they don't like that we are building a lot of roads, they don't like the CO2 emissions, and they dislike the status of the environment, which you can see is pretty bad over here actually. So yeah, we'll have to maybe look at that. There are also the green things. The green things are likewise a little bit better. So you can see that our economy really right now enjoys a technological advantage. That has a little bit of a positive effect on GDP, but also on productivity, which I think in turn boosts GDP, trade, high productivity, and so on. So high productivity is, I think, another of these green factors. Yeah. So that again feeds into GDP, so that means our GDP should be looking actually pretty well, and it does. So that's nice to see. And we'll talk about the red stuff in a second. Of course, the idea here is to try to get rid of that and be able to deal with that. Let me just jump to the last thing about the UI over here, and that is this top row. So the things that we need most is the political capital and our dollar values over here. So political capital is what we need to change any of these policies. So for example, if we were to change, let's say food stamps, right? If we were to change food stamps over here, you can see that it currently costs us 23 billion per quarter. And we could change the level of spending over here. We could spend very little, we could spend a little bit more, and you can see how that would change things over here. But it would also cost us political capital. So to increase this, we need to pay 4 political capital. To lower it, we need to pay 10 political capital. And to cancel the policy outright, we need to spend 24 of our 25 political capital. So we're not going to do that for now. We are going to do that in a little while. But yeah, we can also introduce new laws. As you can see over here, let's say if we were to include, I don't know, a recycling policy, then we need to spend about 23 of our 25 political capital. And of course it would cost us a little bit of money. It will also take time to implement these things. Some of these things have a little bit of a delay. You can probably see that. Let's have a look at the environment over here. So yeah, if the pollution controls were to increase, so if the pollution would drop, and then it would take about 12 quarters for this to come fully into effect. There might be a little bit of effect right in turn 1, but not over a couple of turns will this really have a huge effect. Right, how do we gain political capital? It is granted to us by our ministers, and you can see they all have a little bit different stats over here: loyalty, experience, campaigning, but they also have focus group assigned to them, and we'll have to look at that in a little while. For now I think it's fine. We'll keep these people to go in the first couple of rounds, but we'll have to deal with that in a short while. You can also see that money is of course a thing, because this is a politics simulator, and there is going to be some issue with that, because right now we have an income of 1,300 billion, so 1.3 trillion I guess, but however we do spend 1.6 trillion, which means we have a deficit of $300 billion per quarter, which piles into a debt of about 3.4 billion. So that's not really great. It is, you can see this is where we are right now, so this is a little bit immaterial. The past it's just in the game to build up this thing, but you can see our debt to GDP ratio is relatively stable for now, or relatively okay for now. It's a good level, 65%, shouldn't be too bad. But with our deficit increasing that number by each turn, this is really not sustainable, so we'll have to take money into account quite a bit. There are also a couple of other things that are not quite as important. This maybe is the most important. This is the intelligence briefing, so if we sort of piss off some of these people too much, we'll have to take into account that they might take up terrorist causes. So for example, the Patriot Army or the Black Power group might be rising if the Patriots or the ethnic minorities would be getting too strong. So we'll have to deal with that in a short while. So I think that really covers the UI, and I'll be talking a little bit about that as we go on and play the game. But before we go right into it, I want to talk a little bit about what we want to do in this playthrough and how we want to structure it. So firstly, as I said, this is played in quarters, and you can see that this is each turn takes 3 months, and in about 16 months we'll have one election. In 16 quarter turns, so in 4 years we'll have the next election, and then we have, maybe if we win that election, another 4 years to really implement what we want to do over here, and that is of course to introduce communism. Right now, the USA, as you would expect, is not a very communist country. It's in fact a very unequal country, if you want. It's based on very economic, liberal, capitalist ideas. Although the capitalist-socialist split is about 50-50 over here, we'll have to work a little bit on the socialist membership. We'll want to increase the role of trade unions over here. And then in fact we want to unlock an achievement which is called Socialst Utopia, I think. And we'll also want to make sure that our security services are strengthened. Because what is communism if it doesn't have an appropriate level of surveillance? So yeah, these are the things that we want to do. We will roleplay it a little bit, so we will play some as, let's say, a president who comes in after it was pushed by a very strong leftist idea in the current US political environment, which means we will be looking at things like racial tensions, and we'll be looking at things like student loans. We'll be looking at favoring the young a little bit more. And we'll be trying to slowly push ourselves into communist territory, and in the end want to end up as really proper communist. We will have to be a little bit, in fact more than a little bit, careful about that, because it's extremely difficult to achieve that. There are things that will push us back. Right now our GDP is pretty high actually. You can sort of expect that to go down as the game progresses because of the international economy, which we should be seeing as factoring in here. Global economy, there it is. Right now it has a plus 15% effect, which is very nice, and that also drives up our tax income, but that's not gonna be forever, firstly. And more importantly, as we introduced sort of socialist and later on communist policies, we will see that drop dramatically, because there will be a couple of effects, and we'll need to work very hard to avoid some of these negative effects that can come in. Specifically, two things that are called corporate exodus and brain drain. So basically companies or private people leaving the country as they feel that they don't have the economic perspective that capitalism allows that. To be honest, that playthrough will be a little bit difficult for me, because innately I'm much more personally leaning towards sort of between capitalist, liberal ideas. So my political compass, it would be generally a good idea to have people keep the money that they earn, with some exceptions. Of course, I want to live in an equal society. To some degree. I think it's fair that some people should be supported if they can't support themselves, but I do think that there's a strong reason to keep an incentive for people to earn something in the first place and to be creative. So it will be difficult for me personally to conduct these policies, because this is a game where you really tend to follow your own beliefs, so I have to make a conscious effort to work against that. Also, we will need to be a little bit more careful even, because I am playing with a mod, which we should see over here. So this is the most important thing about the mod. This is called innovation. So this is again something that sort of simulates that if you put up inheritance tax or corporation tax too much, people will not innovate quite as much, and that will in turn then decrease GDP and so on and so forth, and a couple of other things as well. So we'll need to be a little bit careful about that. But I think this is going to be fine. So before we go into the game proper, I want to talk a little bit about the issues that we have over here and our overall plan. So our overall plan will be to first address these red issues, to make sure everyone feels a little bit better about us, and maybe going into the next election we'll have a little bit of a better chance to stay around. We'll also try to push up then as a second priority socialist membership, and really introduce the measures that we do need to take care into that. Now, I expect that during that process I will piss off quite a couple of people, especially capitalists and maybe the religious people. These guys will be a little bit mad at me, so what I'll need to do is I'll need to increase some of these effects down here. So some of the armed police, some of the intelligence services, CCTV cameras, curfews, all of this would be helpful in trying to keep down the threat assessment over here. Otherwise they'll simply try to assassinate me. I think the Battenberg group is the Freedom League? I think the Battenberg group is the potential terrorist group that feeds from capitalist people. It will also not be that particularly popular with the wealthy in a short while, because we'll do quite a couple of things to limit things. So yeah, therefore we'll need to, as a second or third step, actually increase our security services over here, and then in fourth step really go into deep communist territory. Now, before I go into the actual game, let's talk a bit about the negative and positive effects over here. So the positive effects are high productivity, which exclusively feeds from our level of high productivity, and does give self-employed people, capitalist people, quite a bit of a rise. Also this GDP boost of nearly 7% is really nice. So we need to make sure that productivity, we really want to make sure that that stays on a high level. You can see it's fed by a couple of things: health, education, technology, most importantly. Alcohol consumption is driving it down, wages are okay. Labour laws are currently driving it up a little. Now that's because labour laws are really low, so they are set at a very low level, as you would expect in the US. So yeah, people are basically not protected at all at the workplace. So as you would expect, socialists and trade unionists do not like this level. This low level is increasing the working week. It's popular with capitalists, but it is increasing our productivity. So what we'll in the end want to do is revert that trend and basically drop down the working week, and that will have an effect on productivity, which is of course not great. It's effectively a minus 7% change on that. But on the other hand, it will increase the membership of socialism and trade unionism, So that's very nice, and they'll be very happy about that. But of course it does endanger our high productivity over here. Likewise, we'll have to be a little bit careful about the technological advantage over here, which is driven primarily by technology, and which does give our productivity and GDP quite a bit of boost, so we'll need to be careful to maintain this, but again it's also driven by innovation, and innovation might come down. Some of these things really might come down. And there's a hidden effect that you cannot see right now, but there's a negative effect that is associated with very high technology, and that is a shortage of good electronic material, also rare earth, and we'll need to tackle that as one of our first steps. You can see in the economy there are also two negative effects. There's pollution, which we already talked a little bit about. It's driving down health, it's driving up some of the other things. It's not quite as crucial, but it does cost us a little bit of money, so we'll try to work on that a little bit, keep up the environment. We'll also need to look at the skills shortage over here, because that is driving down GDP actually quite massively at 12%. So we'll need to bring that down a little bit. The good news is it's not that far. So we'll need to make sure that we either increase education or immigration to stop skill shortages or other things. So we'll need to address this as one of our first steps. Then we have the real estate bubble over here, which of course does decrease equality and the use. So I think if we are playing an a hypothetical Bernie Sanders, I think this would really go down, need to go down. This would be really one of the first things to be addressed. Many of the other things over here are in fact a little bit more complicated. So we have ghettos over here, which is driven by immigration, but most importantly by racial tensions. And you can see liberals really dislike it, equality goes down, immigration goes down a little bit, ethnic minorities really dislike it. It's actually on the rise. So we'll need to make sure that either immigration goes down, which I don't think I want, or racial tension goes down. And you can see it would have a long-term effect. So this is ghettos. This is nearly 4 years over which this would need to come down. And you can see racial tension is really quite high at the moment. So we'll need to address this as one of our first steps. Now the positive effects of dealing with racial tension is not only that ethnic minorities would dislike it, it would also be that it would decrease violent crime a little bit, and it would also decrease this negative effect, race riots. So this is really quite bad, because conservatives dislike it, everyone dislikes it. So everyone dislikes it, conservatives dislike it a little bit more even. And it does have some negative effect on GDP and our perception as a strong leader. So yeah, we'll need to try to address these. There's also antisocial behavior, which is not that great. Does decrease tourism, does decrease a couple of things. But yeah, we'll need to try to reduce that a little bit. We'll also have to look at internet crime over here, because it's reducing GDP. And everyone dislikes it really. So yeah, we'll need to take care of that. And lastly, one of the things that is really difficult to address, but which is really quite urgent to address actually, because this is leading to a massive increase in cost, is alcohol abuse. And that is primarily driven by alcohol consumption, which as you can see is pretty high up here. So these are probably the first things that we do want to look at. Lastly, there's also asthma epidemic, which is driven by high car usage and the low level of the environment. It does decrease productivity a little bit, but most importantly, it really is disliked by parents. But it's very difficult to get rid of that truly, so that will have to take a little bit of a backseat. Now, in terms of our income and expenditure, I think we'll have to look a little bit at income tax at the income side, because as you can see over here, actually we are borrowing. Borrowing is one of our biggest quote-unquote income items. So yeah, we'll have to look at increasing a couple of taxes, and that might be a little bit of the more difficult thing. In terms of what we spent money on, the military is actually about 17% of our spending. Then we have state pensions, state schools, and quite a lot of the other things. And that's going to be a little bit difficult. I think we might have to decrease military spending a little bit. It's currently, as we saw, really high. But the downside is that it's really expensive in terms of political capital to decrease this to a more reasonable level. So we'll need to be a little bit careful about that in setting our priorities. Right, that's our brief introduction. So the way I plan to play this is that we will be playing for 4 quarters, so 1 gear, in every episode. So some of these episodes will be a little bit shorter, some of these will be a little bit longer, but it does mean we have a good 8 episodes in front of us where we can play through this and hopefully see where we get. So not too long, a series really just of all 8 play episodes plus this one, so I'm very excited for that, and I'm looking forward to hosting you on this series. Let me know if you like it by clicking the link below, of course. It does help out the channel a little bit, and I don't ask that often, but for a new series it does help me to see whether you'd like to see more of this. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!